Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Jeffrey, and I'm an Azure specialist with Microsoft. And presenting with me is Adam. Adam.
Yep. Hey, everyone. I'm Adam Lotz with Citrix. I'm on our virtual apps and desktops product marketing team. I've been around Citrix and Microsoft stuff for the last 20 years, so you may have heard from me before in the past on some of these topics.
Absolutely. So we also have with us John Wilson. So, John.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is John Wilson. I'm a cloud solution architect with Microsoft, focused on hybrid Citrix and virtual desktop solutions.
Great. And we're going to be walking everyone through Citrix and Microsoft and how we're powering the modern workplace through technologies like Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops and Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop together. And as Dan said, please feel free to type some comments there in the chat window. You'll see us looking off to the side every so often, trying to see what people have to say. We're happy to tackle those comments as they come in. So Dan, it's funny when I see this slide, right, talking about a changing world and what that means for technology. It used to be I would look at this and I'd say, oh, we've got this cloud transformation effort, right? And businesses are changing and employees have their cell phones all the time. We talk about the consumerization of IT. And I see these words now and all I think is, man, I remember when I used to go into the office.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing some of the opportunities we've had through the crisis to engage with customers and be able to assist them to rapidly adopt these technologies that we've been talking about. But all of a sudden, there was a critical need. So, for example, I have a customer who is a healthcare customer, and we got the call that they had to move 5,000 people to switch to work from home. At the same time, they were increasing the workload as they're trying to help their patients. So, actually, John Wilson and I have been engaged with them over the last couple of weeks to extend their Citrix environment into Azure to support the additional capacity that they needed. So tremendous effort and great work by that team in order to make that a success. So that's just one example. I know you've been engaged with customers as well through this.
Yeah, that's a really common story. In fact, I was just chatting yesterday with a Citrix partner, and they had a similar customer about scale of about 1,000 users, and they had been rolling out virtual desktops in a non-Azure cloud, so one of the other big cloud providers, and they were on the scale of about 200 users in that environment. And as the COVID crisis hit, and they needed to really adapt their strategy and roll out a lot more desktops, they looked at Windows Virtual Desktop and Azure. And they used that same Citrix environment then to tie into the Azure cloud, and they spun up all 1,000 users virtually, really in a matter of, I think he said, about 2 to 3 weeks, right? So it was a big shift for their business and a big change in how they did things. But because were already on that path, he said it was pretty seamless for them. And from our side, right, being able to leverage the Azure cloud made a big difference there in terms of scalability, price, and flexibility in their environment. And in fact, he said specifically that price was a big concern for them. Since in their other cloud environment, they were fighting with some of the licensing implications of doing that. And Windows Virtual Desktop made that a lot easier for them to consume.
Well, that's part of what we see, that as you evaluate these solutions for 100 users or 200 users, the price point doesn't make as big of a difference. But if we're going to scale to thousands of users, then all of a sudden, being able to change that price point makes a huge difference. And that's where the combination of Citrix on Microsoft with WinVD gives us by far the best price point and the opportunity to give customers a great solution at a low price point, and especially at scale. That makes a huge difference. So let's dig into it.
Sure. So it's funny, as we talk about these technologies, I'd say that a lot of what's changed over the last month are sort of the pressures that we get externally and the demands that business has for continuity, right? So we certainly see a lot in terms of consumer expectations, and we've got a whole new set of security concerns and regulatory shifts as these people are now out of the office and into their home environments and working on all kinds of different devices. So of course, on the business side, we've got pressure to adopt these new work models, while still providing a scalable solution, and of course, being focused on business continuity. And I'd say that's the biggest shift in the conversations that we've been having over the last few months. Is it really went from a conversation around user experience and enabling more productivity and enabling access to all these applications in a secure fashion, to just getting down to the nitty gritty of it. Like, how do I keep my business running? How do I provide that continuity? And in many cases, do it with the same IT staff I had before. And that's something that the cloud has certainly pushed a big shift for.
Right, and that's something that the crisis has really driven from my perspective when we look at that business continuity, where all of a sudden I've got to give my users the same experience, the same ability to do their jobs, but to be able to do that remotely. And how can I do that in a matter of hours or a couple of days? And that's part of what this solution has given us.
Yeah, and I will say I've heard I'm relieved to hear that in a sense the IT budgets have freed up to sort of respond to this crisis. As a lot of times, now we even hear from people, well, my travel budget is gone to zero, my office space budget has dropped dramatically. So at least IT is getting some of the funding they need. But of course, now is not a great time to try to ramp up your capacity in terms of staffing on the IT side. So certainly a lot of these guys in the trenches are being asked to do more with the same number of people, which can be tough, but we've got great solutions out there to empower them. So no, I'm sorry, everyone. It looks like we had some CEOs doing other things during this meeting slot. So you get Dan and Adam instead of Satya and David. But I think the messages that our corporate leadership have are strong. And Dan, I'll let you speak in for Satya here on the Microsoft side.
Absolutely. So for Microsoft, and you may have seen this if you've been following Microsoft at all, but part of the message we're talking about is what we call the three clouds. But really, these are three massive platform opportunities for us. And Azure is the first one. And this is the place where we're providing services. It really is the ability for every organization on the planet to be able to tap into compute resources in a way that in the past you always had to build that out yourself. And so in an opportunity like what's happening through this COVID crisis, if you didn't have that capacity already, would have to get a hold of data center space, get a hold of hardware to be able to support the solution, and then deploy the software onto it to provide that. And now it's a matter of simply connecting into the platform that we're providing, similar to what we do with Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365 as well.
Yeah, I mean, the conversations I had with IT leaders over the last year or so, most of them were sort of, if not in their last data center purchases, we're planning one more, and then that was going to be the end of it. And I'd say certainly we've seen that accelerate over the last couple of months as people start to reevaluate physical space and what that means for their business. And from the Citrix side, of course, we've talked about remote access for a very long time now. So even 20 years ago, we talked about working from anywhere on any device. And these days we throw in, the any's just keep getting longer and longer when we talk about, different technologies, the different applications that we've got out there, and all the different solutions that IT is providing to their end users. So it could be any network, it could be any cloud, it could be any type of application, and now it's any room in your house where you're working from. So certainly Citrix has been talking about productivity and innovation and empowering end users. But over the last few months, we've really taken a step back and gotten back to the core of let's talk about how we enable remote work and how we can make that more effective and really help your end users be productive wherever they're at.
And that's absolutely been the cornerstone of our partnership going back decades now, being able to provide that capability. And that's been such an important part of Microsoft's offering to customers. And it's been our partnership that actually created that capability and made it possible to begin with.
Yeah, definitely a long history there between our companies.
Absolutely.
And as I said, right, giving everyone the ability to work from anywhere is key to what we're both trying to provide here. So if we talk about disruption, and we've all just lived through hopefully the largest disruption we'll ever see in our corporate careers, yeah. And really providing that secure workspace for those end users. And as Dan says, the advances we've seen on the cloud side and the Azure cloud and the scalability and the benefits that we have from migrating IT off into a secure data center elsewhere have really been proven out this time around.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. Hopefully this is the biggest disruption we'll ever see. Certainly there will be smaller disruptions, but our ability to plan through and execute through those will continue to be critical.
Yeah, and I feel like we've got a real challenge now where people aren't sure if we're in the beginning, the middle, or the end of this disruption, right? And as we have these IT conversations, I'd say that more forward-looking CXOs are looking at this as a long-term challenge. And we see a lot of people talking about the impact that will have on their business, even years from now, right? In terms of the way A, consumers use their product, and B, the way their own employees interact around the office, how their work styles are likely to shift, and what that means for them. And the truth is, we were already on this journey, right? So we already had many different types of devices, users working from anywhere, as their lives progressed around their corporate responsibilities, and we had all kinds of different applications and data sets driving that on the back end. So I'd say that in a unique sense, we were well positioned in that our own workforces were already sort of used to the idea of picking up work and taking it home. The challenge was that we didn't have the same scale concerns from the IT side before.
Absolutely. And part of what we see, and I hear the leadership at Microsoft talking this way, that it's not a switch that we're flipping. So we sort of flipped the switch to move to everybody's working from home because of the crisis, but it's not a flip the switch back. It's really more of a dial. So we're going to be scaling back toward where people are going to be working and how, where that location is going to be, what those options are. And depending on how the crisis moves, we may have to dial it a little bit back or a little bit forward. And some of the phases or stages that the government is giving us guidance on. So as we think about that dial and rotating that dial back and forth, all of these technologies enable us to be able to be on a spectrum rather than we're at the office or we're at home. Now we can be able to work where we are, where we need to. And that becomes a part of that business continuation that we need to be able to do.
Yeah, Dan, I think that's a really important point, right? So as we get back to some level of normal and redefine what normal is, it is a migration back, right? We did sort of flip the switch because everyone had to go somewhere else.
Right.
But I know I'm not sure what my own workday will look like 3 months from now, and where I'll be doing those activities and what it will mean for me. And so we've certainly got a suite of technologies that bring all of this together, right? So I'd say that Microsoft and Citrix together have been developing solutions that have redefined what corporate work looks like and what that means. And I like Microsoft's modern desktop moniker for the evolution of these things. And we've got a number of solutions on the back end and the front end that tie all this together. Everything from the cloud technologies, from storage and file sharing solutions to help people be more productive with their data, help them collaborate regardless of where they're at. Of course, virtual apps and desktops, a key point of our conversations today, because that lets us take those familiar Windows applications and virtualize them, put them on any type of device, and get them in users' hands very quickly and easily, as well as communications technologies. So 10 years ago, us being able to have this kind of meeting in a productive sense would have been much more challenging. So I think that we've seen a dramatic uptick in all the different ways people are communicating and all of the multimedia experiences that we want to enable, again, across any device for all sorts of different users and different use cases.
Absolutely. And at the same time, people's expectations have changed. That in the past, if you were going to participate in a computer-based event, that meant you had a desktop that you were sitting in front of, and that was how you accessed those resources and experiences. And today, that's not people's expectation at all. So I may have a phone or a tablet or be anywhere and be able to access not just one way, but a full spectrum of ways that I want to be able to access those resources or even this meeting. And that's exactly what we're providing with this platform.
Yeah, I have learned my lesson that for meetings, I like to stick to my desktop. That gives you a very centered frame of view for what's going on and makes what's behind me a little more predictable in my daily activities.
Certainly, if you're presenting like this, I agree.
So let's talk a little bit more about Citrix Workspace and Azure and what those technologies look like together. Now, as we talk about Azure and Citrix and what that means for us, I'll say that Citrix certainly runs the majority of its business on the Azure platform. So if you're familiar with Citrix technologies, we've been talking about Citrix Cloud for the last 5 or 6 years now. And Citrix Cloud is in no way a competitor to the public clouds, right? We are a consumer of public clouds. And in fact, Citrix Cloud itself is hosted on the Azure platform. And really a better moniker for that would have been Citrix as a service, right? So that's us taking the traditional Citrix services that our users know and love. So all the way back to XenApp, presentation server, whatever you might have known Citrix for in the past as an on-prem product. and cloudifying that, turning them into services that our admins can consume. So Citrix Cloud fully rolled out on the Azure platform. We use that for all of our running services internally. And it gives us a scalable backend so that, again, we're not in the business of running a data center. We don't have to worry about all that backend chaos. And certainly we've seen, the vast majority of our customers do the same thing. I don't have the slide in front of me with data on it in terms of scale and numbers, but I can tell you that for desktop and app virtualization through Citrix, Azure is winning by a landslide.
Well, and one of the reasons why our partnership is so strong and why the platform of Azure is so strong is this blue number you see toward the bottom of the slide, $16 billion of R&D spend in 2019 alone. So Microsoft continues to invest into our research and development efforts, and the outcomes of that we see through the offerings that we make in Azure and across the three clouds. So really enabling the capabilities that Citrix is providing to our customers and the things that we're doing with those underlying services as well.
Yeah, and I feel like we've seen an interesting shift in IT over the last few years, specifically in terms of the attitudes around cloud and what it means for their business, right? So as the IT admin role has changed, it's been more around providing out services to the business and less about running that data center. And I was one of those guys back in the day that, I ran racks of servers, and I was so proud of my cabling and my redundancy plans, my backup. And I actually worked for a financial services firm. And if we had 5 seconds of downtime during the trading day, it was a call from the CEO, right? And as cloud has become more commonplace, I think a lot of the early objections were, how do I know it's secure? How do I know it'll have the uptime? How do I invest in that when I don't know that I can control it? And as you sort of dig into that, the reality is that cloud providers like Azure, have 100 times the staff looking at security and looking at uptime and looking at reliability than most people could ever hope to have in their on-prem data centers. And the difference is really it's a matter of trust, right? And it's a matter of trust in where you're putting your data and how you're going to access it. And I think that we've seen a remarkable response from the cloud providers and Microsoft specifically over the last couple of years in giving us reliable foundations to build on top of.
I agree completely. And at the same time, it is a partnership, right? So just like Citrix and Microsoft are partnering together, it is a partnership with our customers to be able to secure those solutions end to end. So we're providing a secure and reliable platform, but it's important that we architect those solutions all the way to the end to include security and reliability in the way that you guys implement those services. And that's part of what Microsoft and Citrix want to work together with you to ensure those things come into play.
Absolutely. And for Citrix, when we talk about cloud transformation, it's really about hybrid cloud, because we acknowledge that today many of our customers are in the process of making that leap, and it's a journey, right? Transitioning your data centers to the cloud. But they're not ready to go all in. They don't have the resources or the time or the confidence quite yet to lift and shift everything from the data center into the cloud. And that's okay, right? They want to make the most of the capital investment they've got on premises. They want to use those data centers as much as they can. They want to make sure they've gotten their value out of that investment they made. So many of our technologies are focused around really helping customers make that transition as easily as possible. And again, folks that were already on that journey, they saw tremendous success over the last month or so in accelerating that, in spinning up new virtual machines in Azure, in leveraging those existing images that maybe they had built for an on-prem environment initially, and tweaking them and pushing them to the cloud and rolling them out as cloud desktops now. So absolutely, we want to make sure that customers are well positioned to make these kind of shifts and sort of dial that back and forward as they need to, as their needs change. And we've got all kinds of automated technologies, white papers to help you plan that, and of course a consulting team to help out as well. And then great partners like Dan on the Microsoft side to really walk you through the environment and understand what the cloud's going to mean to you.
And that's really the beauty of this solution in my mind, is that you have made the investment, you've done all this work to build out your Citrix capability, and now we can simply leverage what Citrix has built in to then extend that into Azure on the backside, and be able to get benefits of running that platform now through what you've already made the investment and done the work to do.
Yeah, so we don't like to talk to IT folks about the wholesale move into the cloud. It's really about migration, and it's doing it at your pace. And I think that Windows Virtual Desktop is a great way to talk about that today and really look at how virtualized desktops are changing and what people are now calling cloud desktops and what that means for your business. And we look at the Citrix virtualization lineup, right? So again, this dates back, as long as me inside Citrix when we talk about how we're providing out desktop and app capabilities. And we've really got three different ways from the Citrix side that you can consume Windows Virtual Desktop today. And I'm not going to take these in order as we go through the presentation, but I'll sort of lay them out in order of simple to comprehensive for you right now. So on the left, we've got our Citrix Managed Desktops product, and this is actually our newest offering. Citrix Managed Desktops is a fully managed DaaS solution. It's based on Azure. It's based on Windows Virtual Desktop, but it's managed by Citrix. So you can have a single bill or you can have a bring your own Azure model for it. And it's the fastest way to deploy virtual apps and desktops in the cloud. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm in this urgent situation, I need to spin some capacity up. I've got new unexpected workloads that I've got to roll out. I've got people working from home. I want to get them a secure desktop in the cloud. CMD, the quickest way you can make that happen and the easiest management. Now it's not quite as flexible as our product lines as we go up the scale, but certainly a great way to dip your toes into virtualization or even enable new use cases if you've got a big Citrix environment already. So definitely something I think people should take a look at as they look at Windows Virtual Desktop as the platform they want to embrace, but maybe they're not there yet in terms of spinning up all of that effort on their own. They don't want to manage all that capacity themselves. They want to sort of offload some of that to Citrix or Citrix partner and helping them get up and running quickly. Then as we move up the stack, we've got our flagship virtual apps and desktops product line. So if you've been with Citrix for 20 years like I have, you might know that as Zen App and Zen Desktop. You might know it as Presentation Server. There's all sorts of different ways people have rolled this out on premises throughout the years. And the virtual apps and desktops service today as part of Citrix Cloud will manage those on-prem and cloud workloads side by side, right? So it's true hybrid management of your workloads. Again, we run that service in Azure, and many of our customers, in fact, the majority of our customers are rolling out their cloud virtual desktops in Azure. And it's going to give you the flexibility to take those same workloads that you've got on-prem, migrate them back and forth, do automatic scaling between your on-prem environment and the cloud for capacity bursting, a lot of flexibility in how you roll that out and what you can do with those images. So virtual apps and desktops, certainly the product we'll talk about the most today, and what that means for your Windows Virtual Desktop consumption and the value that we add on there on top of Windows Virtual Desktop as a platform itself. And on the right, you've got the Citrix Workspace. And that's really our comprehensive look at everything you do in terms of applications and end user interactivity, right? So it's got all of the functionality in our app and desktop virtualization suite. It adds in things like endpoint management, it adds our share file content collaboration tools, and gives you access control, intelligence in your user experience so that we can escalate important tasks to your users more quickly and easily, give them a single view of all this different content they've got in their day. And it even adds on security and performance analytics. So a very in-depth look at everything that happens in your environment and takes it one step past just the regular virtual apps and desktops lineup. But all of these technologies certainly rely heavily on the platform we get out of Windows Virtual Desktop and the new advantages we have with things like the Windows 10 multi-session system can really help with scalability, can drive your cloud consumption costs down, and give you new opportunities to reach a broader set of your users with app and desktop virtualization.
And when we think about the key enabler of what is new and different in this offering from what people have always been able to do through the Citrix and Microsoft partnership, that Windows 10 multi-session on WinVD does give us that. It's an order of magnitude drop in the cost point of that compute service. So it's a critical difference and something that we definitely want to highlight through our conversation today.
Yeah, and multi-session capabilities inside a Windows operating system is something that Citrix has been it's been foundational to us all along, right? Because of the cost and management benefits that we saw out of that. So back in the day, that would have been a service you would add to your Windows Server workloads, and now getting that same capability out of Windows 10 means we get improved application compatibility. We see a lot more in terms of user adoption and they get the Windows 10 experience. And just as Citrix talks about workspace as being that first page you want to put in front of the user, I mean, Microsoft clearly has evolved Windows 10 to be the friendliest end user operating system. I think just about everyone has got a Windows 10 desktop they interact with one way or another. And we'll bring that multi-user experience to the cloud desktop and host it out across any device. I think super important for that continuity of experience for our end users.
And so Windows 10 multi-session then gives me the ability to have multiple connections into a single Windows client image. So it behaves the way that we've done Windows Server in the past, but now that's happening on a Windows client, and that is only available on Azure, and it's fully enabled through the Citrix solutions on top.
Yeah, and Dan, there's some pretty dramatic price benefits to that as well, right? You want to talk about that real quickly?
Absolutely. So we are seeing an order of magnitude drop. So just in ballpark numbers, when I think about what it costs to run a single session image, we typically see that in a sort of $35 per user per month. And it does depend on the workloads. That decides how much compute cost you have, depending on what the workload is and how many users you're able to get into those, so that user density. But with the Windows 10 multi-session, we are seeing really literally an order of magnitude drop. So from $35, we see some of our customers in the $3 to $4 range for that compute. So order of magnitude drop, which has a huge impact when we start to talk about scaled users. So 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 users, that difference is absolutely a huge difference on the balance sheet.
Yeah, and that's something that we would provide out in the past on that server platform. But again, being able to do it on top of Windows 10 makes things that much easier for end users to consume. And it's not just Windows 10, right? So Windows Virtual Desktop and part of Azure, we can still run all of the server OS platforms out there. You've got Windows 7 extended support even on the Azure platform, which is interesting, right? I'm actually curious, have you seen pretty good adoption of that as part of Windows Virtual Desktop in terms of folks moving their critical Win 7 workloads out that were maybe locked in the data center for a while there?
So we have seen some Windows 7 workloads move out there. Clearly the Windows 10 multi-session has been a pivot point for customers, but we absolutely do see some of that Windows 7 adoption as well. Exactly the reasons you're talking about, right? That we have application-driven reasons why they are on Windows 7 today. And so being able to leverage that out there has made a big difference for customers, especially when they needed to move quickly.
Right. And in terms of management, right, we put the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service right in the middle of this slide, right, because it's managing everything you've got in your Azure subscription there in terms of Windows Virtual Desktop, Virtual App and Desktop workloads, as well as all the content you have back in your data center. And I think our ability to help you scale that and kind of mix and match for either scenario or user or application type is really helping our admins with their flexibility and keeping an eye on their bottom line, right? Because it's going to be much easier for them, especially times right now, to scale into the cloud than try to over provision their data center and manage all that hardware, especially in times when access to those facilities can be tough as well. So lots of things going on in this world, and I think that over time, we're absolutely going to see that shift, right? We'll absolutely see cloud taking a bigger and bigger role in people's IT deployments, regardless of their corporate size. But for the foreseeable future, there will always be that on-prem component. There's always going to be a little bit of data center in your mix, and we're happy to help you strike that balance. Now, just talking about what we've actually seen. So I grabbed this graph and I took some of the numbers out for everyone's everyone's privacy. But looking at from our side, right, because we have the Citrix Cloud service, we have anonymous visibility into what kind of workloads are being hosted and what goes on. I can say we've seen some really dramatic numbers coming out of the Citrix and Windows Virtual Desktop partnership. So just looking at the last 2 months, right, so from February of this year until today, we've actually seen a little bit more than a 4-fold increase in the total number of VDAs, so virtual desktops being hosted on Windows Virtual Desktop through Citrix. And we've actually seen a doubling in the number of customers that are using these solutions together. And that's dramatic, right? That's a tremendous trajectory for a relatively new service. So Windows Virtual Desktop has been in GA for I think about 9 months now. And we've certainly had lots of interest and lots of conversations, but I think the spike in utilization here really illustrates how quickly our end users and admins were able to take advantage of this partnership and really shows the value that Citrix customers were able to provide.
Absolutely. And that spike through the crisis is one of the benefits that we get on this platform as well. That in the past, you had to, if you were going to double or quadruple your capacity, you were going to have to do a lot of work in advance in order to make that even possible. And the power of this solution is riding on that cloud platform so we can scale it up as you need to and then scale it back down. So if your need changes radically today, we can get what we need. And then tomorrow, if we're back to normal work and we don't have to run these anymore, then we can literally turn them off and stop paying for them. So it's a huge difference in mindset about what we can do, and it's a huge difference in terms of cost models as well.
Yeah, Dan, it's funny you say that about even being able to get a hold of that equipment to be able to ramp up capacity. I found myself in the funny position yesterday of trying to help out a family member and buy them a PC to ship to them in another state, and I was shocked to find out that there's legitimately a consumer shortage on things, even like monitors, right? Because we've seen such a dramatic global shift. And I keep looking over the right here. I keep looking for questions and comments in the chat. I think everyone's being pretty quiet, which means I think we're doing a fantastic job, Dan. I think that's what that tells me.
Perfect communication, no questions.
So I think we've talked through a lot of these different bullets here in terms of what Citrix offers on top of the WVD platform, and you know I've certainly driven home the hybrid cloud story. I think that's super important for everyone today. Now, if we had the same conversation a year from now, I might downplay that a bit because I think that we will have seen a pretty dramatic shift into that hybrid cloud world. End user experience, of course, super important to Citrix. We talk about workspace, we talk about our intelligence capabilities that let us escalate the most important bits of a user's workday to them right away. We're downplaying that right now because that's not the first thing on IT's mind, right? I think that as we adjust to this new normal of working, though, that's going to become critical in terms of end user adoption and helping them be the most productive as their work environment has shifted. On the monitoring and control side, of course, right? I mean, I think that Azure as a platform gives us great tools to keep an eye on everything that we've got going on, with more visibility than we would have had when they were physical data center machines. The Citrix role there is really in giving you a holistic view around everything that happens in your virtual desktop strategy, and lets you see everything from the networking to the end user experience, to end user performance, right? Making sure they're getting an interactive experience that has good responsiveness, good load time, good boot time, things like that. And then further enhancing their experience through the optimizations we're offering around Teams and Office 365. So fundamental components for both Microsoft and Citrix, and lots of different ways that we can add value on top of the Microsoft stack, and really help both IT and end users get the most out of it.
And it really comes down to that combination of giving people the experience they need, and part of that is giving them access to the tools they need where they are. So enabling Teams and Office 365 in those remote scenarios for whatever type of device are people connected on is the work that we are continuing to do together, and we will continue to iterate on that as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think we're in an interesting place too when it comes to sort of the desktop-centric workers and the app-centric workers, and what that means based on what your role is and what your job looks like. And certainly we've seen that as end users have adopted technology more and more, right? There's actually pushback against IT for their ability to deliver what users feel are modern and high-performing solutions. So I know that both Citrix and Microsoft are working hard helping IT sort of overcome those barriers. Because it's not like it was 10 or 15 years ago, right? Where you got what you got, and IT said, well, here's your experience, please do your job, right? So a lot of what we've seen at Citrix are departmental solutions, end users, sort of business line leaders going out there and purchasing their own solutions left and right? Like buying cloud services, buying app-based services, and just trying to be more efficient and get their job done. And we're trying to help IT navigate all of that and bring that all back under sort of the umbrella of security and control, while still rolling out a good experience for your end users, right? Because we want that across the board. And when we talk about Citrix and Windows Virtual Desktop and how the Virtual Apps and Desktops service can add capabilities, I think a lot of the things on this slide will look familiar to customers of Citrix that used us on top of RDS in the past. And in many ways, Windows Virtual Desktop is an evolution of the RDS technology, I think the benefits that we see in terms of that end user experience on Windows 10, some of the new multi-session scalability capabilities, really drive those points home and make it more cost effective for our users, as well as, of course, the IT benefits of being in the cloud. When we look at the technologies that we bring to the table here, again, cloud management, our HDX pieces are a primary component there, right? So we've been optimizing that last mile transport of the data for over 20 years now in our HDX tech on top of ICA, our ICO protocol that we've talked about for years and years, and really optimized for different devices and different connections. And some of the things that we've done specifically recently here for the Microsoft partnership are extending that great experience on any device and any connection type out to be more optimized for things like video conferencing under Teams and Skype, and giving you that better interactive end user experience for what's now become a multimedia world. And then tying all that together on the back end with things like analytics to help IT really understand what's going on, and workspace environment management to improve performance. They round out the solution in giving you that better view of what's going on, sort of in the 3 to 9 month timeline of your deployment. So it's one thing to roll out a new solution to your end users, especially in a time of crisis, right? And say, well, we've got to get this out right away. But then be able to monitor and maintain and understand everything that happens, and ensure that you've got a strong security story around it. Very important for us in helping IT roll that out and keep it going and make it a meaningful long-term solution as well. So as we talk to Citrix customers about what they're doing with Windows Virtual Desktop today and this sudden spike, we don't expect that to dial back dramatically, right? We expect that to stick around. We expect it to be a key component going forward. It may play a different role. It might be for different scenarios and use cases, but certainly the benefits they're seeing in terms of agility, scalability, and security as well are dramatic, and they've got a place to stay in the enterprise long term. And then as we look then past that, right? So things that we provide out in the longer term sense to keep that environment up and running and keep it productive are scalability, our scaling technologies, right? Being able to burst back and forth to the cloud, to the data center, and really make the most use of your resources. And our long-term image management technologies around provisioning and app layering. So lots of things we've got going on in these spaces that really make the manageability of the solution a long-term viable prospect. And in the session we've got this afternoon that's a little more technical, we'll talk about those in more detail and give you a better look at everything that goes on in that day-to-day maintenance and monitoring of your environment. Now, I did say we talk about some other technologies along the way, and Citrix Managed Desktops is sort of a step back from all of that. So we've got this huge list of features and functionalities around everything that we can do on the Virtual Apps and Desktops platform, our biggest suite of technologies rolled together for you. And then Citrix Managed Desktop sort of picks and chooses the ones that are most critical to a quick and easy deployment, and gives you a simple way to roll that out. So Dan, I've got nothing bad to say about Windows Virtual Desktop. I think it's a fantastic platform, but getting started with it can be tough, right? Especially for an admin that might not have a lot of Azure experience, might not have a lot of PowerShell experience. That can be a new experience for them.
That's absolutely true, and that is something that we are helping customers through. For my customers who are already Citrix customers and have built out that infrastructure, for them to be able to attach to WinVD on the backside and then push their images up there, it's been a really straightforward and seamless experience. So that by far the easiest way to take advantage of WinVD. For the folks who are just starting, certainly WinVD and what you can do to be able to turn it on and take advantage of that low cost compute platform is great, but especially if you're going to be doing any kind of scale, once we get past a proof of concept, then all of the extensions and all of those capabilities that you just shared and the power of that Citrix platform on top really starts to shine.
Yeah, and John in the chat here had asked, if we could talk a little more about use cases and the split between Windows Virtual Desktop and Citrix and how that plays out. And I think it's really a broad spectrum of technologies, and you have to look at what your needs are for that particular use case, right? So Windows Virtual Desktop, fantastic platform. You get all the benefits of that multi-session Windows 10 image. You're going to get great cost benefits in the cloud. I think some of the challenges that I see today are that longer term management, and maybe some of the application management and imaging capabilities that are there right now. And I think we've got a pretty solid add-on in Citrix that helps you take that and kind of extend it to a more complex use case, let's say. So there's certainly a line you can draw there, and I'd say absolutely we see customers that are long-term Citrix customers that have used the virtual apps and desktop service going a multitude of different ways, right? So some of them are spinning up new workloads, say, okay, like this is a good fit for Windows Virtual Desktop on its own, right? And others are coming and say, all right, I'm going to expand here with Citrix Managed Desktops because it gets me a little bit of a simpler management experience. It gets me some of those benefits around the ICA protocol and the monitoring and maintenance of those images. Or they're going, full on in the virtual apps and desktop service integrated with WVD on the back end. So it's hard to give you a sort of a ballpark guidance on when you make those choices. I think back in the day with RDS, a lot of people took as a crutch and said, well, if you're over 1,000 users, you have to use Citrix, right? And that was an easy line in the sand to draw. Say, well, it's just going to be too hard otherwise. I think with Windows Virtual Desktop, it's great that Microsoft is restarting this conversation for us, but it's a little bit more in depth around your use cases and your particular application set and data needs in terms of what solution makes the most sense for you. Is that fair, Dan?
I totally agree, and it definitely does remind me of the older RDS conversation that we used to have. And I agree with you. It's great that we're moving forward, that this solution and the sort of reimagining of what was the RDS technology in WinVD now gives us this platform service versus something that you had to build out on the backside. So I think WinVD is certainly much better than what we did with RDS, but I think the manageability and the extensions that Citrix builds into it are even better than what we had in the past. So as Citrix has continued to build their capabilities on top of the platform, the fact that the platform continues to get better, it multiplies the value, I think, for customers.
Yeah, and I mean we're pretty excited about that, right? So RDS, I would hate to call it a stale technology, but it's something that everyone was pretty comfortable with, and they knew how it worked, and they had a baseline set of expectations for it to get out of that. And with Windows Virtual Desktop, Microsoft is really investing in evolving that service, right? And even things like their acquisition of FSLogix, like suddenly we had all new components that were always going to be there in the platform that we could build on top of. And that makes our solutions better together. And it gives us, building blocks to then add new capabilities on top of. So yeah, lots of opportunity there to really enhance the service and build out more integrated solutions for these different use cases you've got. And again, a wide swath of those technologies are built into even our lower end product of Citrix Managed Desktops, which a lot of people looked at initially when we rolled it out. They said, "Oh, this was like an SMB play from Citrix, and this is not something my enterprise would use." And nothing could be farther from the truth, right? When we talk about Citrix Managed Desktops and how it's leveraging Windows Virtual Desktop at its core, we're really trying to help you get desktops spun up quickly and easily. Right. So when it's an easier use case, you don't need quite the set of advanced management, but you still want that better multimedia experience. You still want to be able to manage this from your Citrix Cloud console. You want to have a single place to deploy these images. CMD is a great option there. And again, as WVD as a platform provides more capabilities, that'll just roll in, right? So we'll take advantage of that along the way. So lots of flexibility in different ways you can skin this cat. And really, that's what we're talking about here is when we say, you've got to look across your business at your different user needs, your different application needs, and the scenarios you want to support, right? Whether that's a business disruption scenario, whether it's business continuity, whether it's trying to do more with less in your IT staff, or this just migration to the cloud for scalability and performance and cost concerns. So lots of different ways to do this. And I'd say that as we talk to different types of customers, there are some trends bubbling out, right? So in different industries and verticals, you might hear people with very specific concerns, but your business is your business, and we really need to have I'd say one-on-one conversations to dig in where we help you find the right fit. And it's nice being in a mature org like Citrix or Microsoft, where we can have those frank conversations with customers and say, hey, maybe you want to go this way, maybe this particular technology is a better fit for this scenario, and we don't have to kind of force you down one path.
Absolutely, and that is the call to action at the end of this session. We're not at the end yet, but absolutely we want our teams to be engaged together. So the Citrix and Microsoft team to engage with you directly to talk about exactly where you are, what your current licensing state is, and what you need to accomplish, and then build that perfect solution for you.
Definitely, definitely. If you want to talk about the technologies more depth, I mean, certainly take a look at the session we've got this afternoon. I think it's coming up shortly after ours. Oh, Dan, you're back on deck presenting that as well, aren't you? But we'll go into some more detail around actually, deployments and what that looks like and how the tech works together. Certainly, we've talked about what it means on the back end and what cloud means to our enterprise customers and how they're adopting it. The other thing we've seen dramatic growth in is in Microsoft Teams and video conferencing, and obviously it's working out nicely in this time of remote work, even for conversations like this. So Dan, I imagine your number of Teams meetings has increased, maybe not exponentially, but probably significantly over the last few months as well.
It absolutely has, and even we've got some new numbers that are beyond what we're seeing on the slide today. So in the month of April, there were 75 million daily active users on Microsoft Teams. So really unprecedented growth as we've continued to have to double and then double again the capacity of what we're providing with Teams. So just tremendous usage, and it's been the ability for those customers who needed it in that moment. It has saved businesses, literally.
Yeah, those are crazy numbers, and I'm not surprised at all. I mean, that's almost a fourfold increase over. This slide was probably early 2020, and you've seen that crazy growth since then. And that's very important to us at Citrix, right? So we see lots of ways to help businesses optimize that experience, and some of that is through virtualization, right? Some of that's through our networking capabilities, different ways that we can help admins manage and maintain these environments and provide secure connections, especially in remote or branch office scenarios. So maybe the branch office not so relevant today, as suddenly your branches are much more distributed with a smaller set of end users. But between our SD-WAN technologies and virtualization and our ability to really optimize that interactive experience over a virtual desktop or app session, gives a lot of opportunity to enterprises to roll these out in a controlled fashion, and again, be able to hand your end users a single desktop image or a set of applications through Citrix Workspace that contains everything they need. Right, and I can't tell you how often I hear that these last couple of weeks, people are like they're 90% of the way there, right? They've almost got everything they need, but they hit this hurdle in authentication, or they hit this hurdle where they couldn't install an application on their device. And it's frustrating as a longtime Citrix user to hear that, because our virtual desktops were out there and up and running just like they had always been.
Absolutely, and that's part of what we see, that for the end user, and we'll dig more into this in the technical session this afternoon, but for the end user, they need to be able to run their applications, and they don't really think about where applications live or what those complexities are. For the IT organization, they're looking at the cost and complexity of managing multiple images, of managing those applications and application sets. How do I deliver that experience for the end user and do that in a way that my limited team is able to do? We only have so many IT people that we're able to put into running this environment. So how can I scale them at the same time I'm scaling the solution for my customers? And so the work that we've done around those applications and being able to reduce the number of images that you use, even as you're getting that really customized experience for individual users, is really critical to our success.
Yeah, and I think for our joint customers, of course, the Windows apps and the Windows desktop workloads are still the strong majority of what they need to deliver and how they're getting this to their end users. But through Citrix, we're dedicated to combining all this content together so that you are delivering a single unified solution for your end users, whether those are SaaS or mobile applications, whether it's content you've got in public cloud storage, maybe they're public cloud applications, or your existing data center content and things that you've rolled out historically on premises. So, through the workspace experience, which ties together everything that Citrix offers, we're looking at giving users that great experience that's got integrated content from all these solutions. And yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, our fastest growing segment in terms of what's being rolled out is Windows native workloads on top of Azure. And Windows Virtual Desktop has got great options there in terms of the licensing flexibility, the capabilities you get to make that meaningful and affordable, especially as we're all trying to make a sudden transition to the cloud. So, when we talk about all the tech together and what Citrix and Microsoft mean, I mean, I'd say that Microsoft is by far our best partner when it comes to rolling out these types of solutions. And in the corporate world, absolutely is powering everyone's business, and being able to tie those critical, business critical applications in with sort of everything else that makes up a user's workday is key for us in providing out that experience. And again, as Dan mentioned, giving you consistency regardless of where you're coming from.
Absolutely. And the reality is that customers, you have the choice of what cloud do you want to take advantage of, what operating systems do you want to run on premise, what devices and capabilities are you going to provide to your users. And so we as Microsoft are competing for, we want to be that platform that underlies your Citrix implementation, even though Citrix is giving you options. And so our investments into those capabilities and enabling additional capabilities like we saw on the Teams slide, so that this partnership is bringing you additional value to what you could get if you chose any different underlying cloud, and that we continue to compete and grow that capability to make it even easier for you to consume and even more powerful, and do that at less cost. So this is an area where competition is good for customers, and that's part of what we are driving toward. And we want to continue to do that, and want to continue to earn your business.
Yeah, and Dan, I mean, I think the growth that we've seen in Azure and the capabilities that have come out of the last few years are nothing short of remarkable, right? I mean, clearly Microsoft's investing dramatically in winning this game, right? And I think that we're happy to be there next to them, and certainly we never could have done built all the solutions that we have at Citrix without that Microsoft partnership. So it's been great for everyone. And I would say it's if you looked 5 or 6 years ago and asked who do you think the cloud leader would be today, you might not have said Microsoft, but I think there's no question right now that everything that's happened in Azure, we see fantastic adoption and on the way to world dominance there as well. But yeah,
Right.
Flexibility. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. For Microsoft, there is no plan B, right? Azure is where we're going. There's no question we're going to continue to provide hybrid capabilities. We agree with you 100%. That is absolutely what we are enabling for customers. But the importance of the platform and being able to leverage the Azure capabilities to enhance what you do on-prem, as well as to give you a place to do things off-prem. We want to give you all of that optional capability for you. And as we partner with customers, we want to be able to continue to help you grow your business. So when you are successful in your business, that is what makes Microsoft successful in our business. And the same thing with our Citrix partnership, right? When we're successful together and our customers are successful together, that's the win-win-win that we're always looking to drive.
Yep, and I think that that flexibility is great, but having that foundation, right, that we can rely on is what's been key for us, for years working together. And as we look towards the future, right? I mean, we start talking more about intelligence and empowerment of our end users, and really, providing out these IT resources for all sorts of different users in different scenarios, regardless of where they're at. And as I said, starting this off, that regardless of where they're at bit has become all the more relevant in this last month. And I think we all have a new appreciation for the fact that work is not happening in a location, right? IT does not mean the data center. It's really about productivity and getting your end users what they need wherever they are to be successful. And I'd say that Citrix and Microsoft are both committed to making that happen.
Without question. And I agree with you that this crisis has changed our ideas about how much things can change, how quickly they can change, and what does work mean? Where does it happen? So working from home and the ability to be able to do what we need to do where we are so we can be safe, but also incredibly productive. And we want to be able to provide both of those and not make it an either or question.
Yep. So Dan, just to wrap this up quickly, I know we're closing in on the half hour here. I think that we've got lots of examples of how Citrix and Microsoft together have solved problems for our customers. When you look at the Fortune 100 and the Fortune 500 statistics, I know that we've got a strong adoption, not just of our historic on-prem products, but our cloud offerings as well. We've seen tremendous adoption of Azure and these new Microsoft technologies. We've seen great rollouts of Citrix deployments that are supporting end users in all these different scenarios. Anything you want to close with there in terms of our joint success in industry?
To me, this point in green is the most critical, right? 30+ year partnership, right? That Microsoft and Citrix have been working together to provide this exact type of capability to you, going back into the 1990s. So when you think about what it is that we're trying to do, provide these capabilities to end users wherever they are and do it securely, there's no partnership that is more successful long-term or more capable today to be able to provide that in a cost-effective, secure, and manageable way.
Yep, I think it's been a great story for the last 30 years, and hopefully we'll see another 30 of it as well.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I see in the chat here, we had a couple people asking about the technical session, which is starting in half an hour from now. And I think we sent the invite out there as well. If anyone else is looking for it, please, by all means, send us a note in the chat. We'll make sure you get there. And you guys can dive in a little deeper to everything we've got going on with Citrix and Windows Virtual Desktop.
So I want to thank Adam and John Wilson, as well as Rob Shaw. I see him answering questions in the chat. Thank you guys for participating, and thank you to everybody who's signed in today. We really appreciate your time, your attention, and the opportunity to share what we're doing together. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.